Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, New Yankee Auto Systems, and this is episode 17 of the Petty Chevy build, which is our street legal Legends car. What we're going to get into this week is some more body repair. When I got the vehicle, both front fenders had some damage to them and they need to be repaired. As you can see, I have two different fenders here. The one on the right side is the blue fender that came on the car. It had a lot of damage that I don't think could be saved. So what I've done is I've gotten some scrap fenders from my Legends car supplier, if you will. They're in a little bit better condition. They're easier to repair. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and try and repair these fenders. I'm going to try and repair this white one so that I can use it on the car. It's my first time doing fiberglass, but we all got to learn sometime, so let's go ahead and get stuck into it. So here are the fenders that I have. The two blue fenders were the ones that came on the vehicle. This left side fender isn't in too terrible a shape. There's some cracks here and there that I think could just be filled over, but I believe that this underneath the blue tape or the blue duct tape is probably cracked because it is cracked on the other fender, so I'd imagine it's the same kind of damage. But overall, this fender itself is in really good shape. There's not a lot of body damage. There's just some cracks every so often on it, like that one down there. That's going to have to get lightly repaired. As far as the right side fender, there is a lot of buckling in where this fender actually mounts to the fender bracket. It must have gotten a hit here and then just cracked all the way through here. What I had thought about doing was sectioning here and repairing it, but once I found a scrap fender, I found it was going to be easier to just cut out the damaged section on that fender from this fender and transfer the piece over. I've already got that cut out and ready to mock up. I've got it pretty close as far as the gaps. However, I didn't have all the right tools when I did it and I should have just waited. But it's going to give me a pretty decent fitment. I've got a pretty big gap there that I'm going to have to fill in, but I do have fiberglass cloth to actually fill in those areas. I'm not just going to Bondo these together. So I'm going to go ahead and get stuck on trying to get this piece molded onto this fender, and that's what I'm going to be working on today.
I started off by lightly sanding away on the fender that I'd be working on with a brown sanding disc on my rotary tool. I wasn't trying to go too deep into anything just yet, but at least see the bare fiberglass to know how far I had to go. The next step would be to use 80 grit sandpaper and sand down any further blemishes or debris I need to get off the fender before repair. There was quite a lot of sanding to do, even on just this small area, this little bit, but I just had to try and get it as close down to the bare fiberglass as possible, just to give myself the best chance of the fiberglass resin adhering.
Alright, so to do this fiberglass repair, what I've done is I went out and got some fiberglass resin, some fiberglass cloth. It is 8 square feet. It should be plenty for this small area that I'm doing. Some brushes to apply the resin, 80 grit sandpaper to sand it down, because that's what the instructions had said to use, was 80 grit. What I did as far as sanding it down was I tried to get it down to the base fiberglass layer, but I did leave it thicker as far as the paint or whatever else was on top of it, because this is a rather thin panel, so I don't want to go too far into the rest of the structure and end up making this piece weaker than it actually is. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but that's what I'm going to do. I feel like the resin should probably adhere well enough to this, and the fiberglass cloth should be able to just bridge all the gaps and make everything in there with it. I'm probably going to lay fiberglass over the top of it, and then what I'll do is on the back side, I'll use Bondo or something like that. I've got some body filler to fill in there, just to fill in the gap a little better, and then fiberglass over top of that again. So I'm going to go ahead and start trying to get this panel adhered to the other one.
The instructions on the fiberglass resin said to clean an area 2 to 3 inches wider than the area that you're looking to repair. I didn't go exactly 2 to 3 inches, but what I did do was clean out a fair amount of it, and then I laid the fiberglass over top and traced that area so I could pre-cut multiple pieces and have them all ready to lay at once. I made sure to reread the instructions on the back of the fiberglass resin. It said if you were to use a quarter of a can, you would use a quarter of a tube of liquid hardener. I don't think I was going to use as much as a quarter of a can, so I still kind of just had to eyeball it in my mixing process. After mixing the epoxy resin and getting a good first coat that saturated the entire area I was working on, I was ready to put my first piece of fiberglass on. I can't tell you how nerve-wracking this part was, because once I did it, there was no going back. However, it's time for me to learn a new skill. So the process for this is very much the same all the way throughout. Rinse and repeat. Put down resin, put down fiberglass, put down resin on top of that, put down fiberglass, push it in, make sure that it's all the way through. So, I mean, that's basically all I was doing. Putting down resin, putting down some more fiberglass. It's a little bit of a learning curve because eventually my resin actually started to get very goopy.
So being the first time I've done this, obviously I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to make errors. I think I put a little too much hardener in my resin. It didn't work long enough. I wanted to err on the side of caution and give it a little bit more hardener because I didn't want to mix a whole quarter can like it says. Easiest is a 50-50 mix, quarter of the can of the resin to a quarter can of the hardener. However, I don't really have any way to measure that out well, so I've just got a big clump now. So I'm just going to go ahead and start over and take that last piece of fiberglass off, see if I can't save it. Nope, no saving that fiberglass. So that's fine. I'm just going to resin over it when I make another batch. What I also should have done was made all of my fiberglass repairs ready at once. I didn't do that. I just wanted to kind of try on this bumper. I got a little ahead of myself. I should have gotten the other bumper ready too, so that way I had some fiberglass and resin, and if I had any extra left over, I could have moved right on to that. However, mixing the hardener wrong, that might be a little bit of a saving grace. So, I mean, you know, it happens. We all make mistakes. I haven't done it before. It's good learning experience for me. Then it's a spare bumper or a spare fender anyway. If I need to, I'll just end up having to buy a new fender, but it's at least worth trying to fix it to see what I can get. I'm going to go wash this brush out before it gets too hard.
I had moved on to prepping on the blue fender, starting with the biggest crack first, just using this brown disc to try and get down to the bare fiberglass material to see how much it was actually going to take. I kind of just did this over and over with every piece on the fender that needed to be repaired.
Alright, so I've tried to learn some lessons from the last time. What I did for this bottom corner here is I just had some aluminum flashing around. I ended up making like a little bit of a ledge so that I can lay some fiberglass in here. I've got all four of the pieces that I want to use cut, ready to go. Same thing with every other area that I have. I've tried to kind of support this with a jack just to make sure that it doesn't move, because I'm going to need to let it set right here until everything sets. There's a lot of breakthroughs on this bumper, or this fender, so I want to make sure that I fix it as best as I can. There's some cracked areas here, and then a crack through down here. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up my resin and hopefully get the hardener right this time and get it applied, see what happens.
At this point, I was nearly finished with the blue fender for this stage of fiberglass repair. While I still had some good epoxy resin left, I was going to jump back over to the white fender and try and get that last piece of fiberglass matted back in.
So I'll give everyone an update. I've got all of the fiberglass laid on there, at least the best way that I think I can for now. The second batch, I don't think I put enough hardener in there, but it did give me a little bit of time to kind of play around with those more compound curves and try and get the fiberglass to lay in there. But I'll give you an update as far as the way it looks right now, because what I think I'm going to have to do is just let this set overnight. It says it's sandable in 2 hours. However, as far as the fiberglass, I'm not going to wait around for another 2 hours today to see if I can sand it. And especially with some of the areas feeling like the hardener wasn't enough, I'm just going to let it set overnight and come back tomorrow. So I'll show you what I have so far. This ledge that I made for this fender here seemed to have worked out okay. There's definitely a lot of low spots in here. I may have to get in and put more fiberglass. I wouldn't necessarily be too surprised by that because there was a big chunk of stuff missing in there. So 4 little layers of fiberglass, I don't think is going to fill that up. I might be able to fill it up on the backside with Bondo, and that's what I'm planning on doing with all of these repairs. I'm going to fill them on the backside either with another layer of fiberglass or some Bondo. As far as this crack through here, it's not great. I'm definitely going to have to fill in this area here and get it a little higher. There was so much distortion in the fender from it being cracked through. I couldn't really get it set up in a great way where I knew it was going to be in the right form. But if I fill this up a little, I don't think that's going to really be a big deal as long as this hardens over and holds that shape well. This side over here, I mean, it went pretty well. That was a little more flat. There wasn't filling in an actual breakthrough. There was just some cracks in here, so I wanted to reinforce this area. I feel like I did pretty well on this part of the fender. This part of the fender here, I tried to wrap some of the fiberglass into the hole there, but that wasn't really working out too well. So I'm going to leave this set just the way it is and have the reinforcement across the crack here. Again, I'll just get on the back side of this either with more fiberglass or with some Bondo to give it some more strength. As far as the first fender that we had repaired, I feel like that actually went really well. As you can kind of see here, as the light's shining through the back, you can see everywhere where I cleaned up to, where the light's kind of shining through, and then where the repair is. As far as this panel, it is still a little big. I'll definitely have to trim it down, but I'd rather have to trim it down than add more to it. This one has been set up for probably 2 hours now. It's still a little tacky, but it's starting to get hard. So I feel like this one, being that it was a little more flat and I was able to put a better piece of fiberglass down on there, this is actually probably going to be the better repair that I've done. But there's definitely some gap across the back here. There's a large gap as far as in the thickness of these two pieces. But I'd rather have the front a little more flush and fill in on the back than have had the back flush and fill in more on the front, because the front's going to be more what you see. This, I'll probably just fiberglass over all this as well, just to get it to reinforce and stay together, and then I'll fill in any low spots with Bondo if I need to. So, first impressions on fiberglass. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. It's definitely a skill, something you have to learn. Is it easy to understand? Yes. You put epoxy down, you put fiberglass down, tap and make sure the epoxy comes through the other fiberglass, and you keep building until you feel like you've had a good enough thickness. Is it something that I would do again? Absolutely. The only way that I'm going to get any better at it is if I keep hammering at it and practice. Everything that I'm going to have to learn on this car, there's a lot of new skills that I have to learn, or a lot of skills that I have to hone, but I feel that that's a good opportunity and a good reason to do it. Ultimately, if I need this car to look schmicko, absolutely perfect, yeah, I'll get a new fender. I'll get someone to paint it up. I'm already gonna have it painted anyway. But I still wanted to give my hand at it, give it a try, because it's just another new skill that I can learn, and I like learning new skills. It's one thing this project is giving me, is a lot of new skills. So ultimately, yes, if you need a professional job done, you should leave it to the professionals. Unless you're kind of like me, you're not afraid to give it a try, hone the skill, learn the skill, and add it to your tool belt. But we'll come back tomorrow and we'll see how well it actually does, and I'll give you a second impression. If it's just crap, I'll let you know that it's just crap.